This happened to me about 2 years ago when I was driving home from New York to Tennessee to visit one of my college friends. I made the trip alone because I actually enjoy driving long distances by myself. I usually just listen to podcasts or music the whole way and stop whenever I feel tired. I left early in the morning thinking I could probably finish the whole drive in one trip. But by the time it got late, I realized I was way too exhausted to safely keep driving. It was around 1 o'clock in the morning at that point, and I was somewhere in Virginia near a highway I don't remember anymore. I pulled off at one of those blue sign exits that only had a gas station, a food place, and a couple of old motels. I chose the cheapest motel because I honestly just needed somewhere to sleep for a few hours. The place looked pretty rough on the outside. It was one of those 2-floor motels where every room faces the parking lot. You know, the kind of motel from every scary movie ever. Half the lights outside were broken, and there were barely any cars there. Slow night, I guess. I almost left and found another place, but I was so tired and honestly, I was looking for a bed, not some fancy resort. The front office was behind thick glass, even though it was open. The guy working there looked like he was in his 50s. He barely even looked up when I walked in. I paid for the room, got my key card, and asked if they had many empty rooms. He said most of the upstairs rooms were empty. I remember that because it made me feel a little better knowing there would not be people making noise all night. Oh boy, the irony of that. My room was on the second floor near the far end of the building. The room was old-fashioned, but for the price, that was expected. There was a weird smell, which was expected in an old hotel or motel. The room was humid as hell, but the AC made such a horrible rattling noise that I just left it off. I honestly considered just sleeping in my car instead, but I was already there and too tired to care anymore. I locked the door and shut the blinds. I took a shower and laid down on the bed with the TV on low volume. I had been in bed for around 20 minutes before I started hearing arguing next door. It sounded like a couple fighting. Oh, great. The walls were thin enough that I could hear muffled voices, but not clearly enough to understand full sentences. I was annoyed because I thought it was going to keep me awake all night. One voice sounded deeper and angry, while the other sounded softer. The weird thing was the softer voice did not sound exactly female. It sounded like someone pretended to sound like a woman, an obvious high-pitched voice coming from a man. The argument kept going back and forth for a while. One voice would get loud and aggressive, and then the other would answer sounding serious, and then the other would answer sounding nervous. I started noticing something strange, though the timing between the voices felt suspiciously perfect. There was never any overlap, like in almost any real fight. Each voice waited perfectly for the other to finish. I turned my TV volume down and sat there listening more carefully. That was when it hit me that it was one guy doing both voices. Once I realized it, I could not unhear it. The deeper voice sounded natural, but the softer voice sounded like the same man trying to copy somebody else. I guess a woman. I remember feeling this weird pit in my stomach because it suddenly changed the whole situation from an annoying argument into something seriously disturbing. No matter how I tried to explain away or make sense of it, I realized it just did not make any sense. The so-called argument kept going for another few minutes before suddenly stopping completely, leaving only silence. I remember lying there staring at the ceiling, hoping maybe the guy had finally gotten tired of whatever the hell he was doing. Then I heard a few slow knocks on the wall beside my bed, a fist hitting the wall like someone knocking on a door. My head snapped to the left. Then I heard this muffled voice through the wall saying, "I hear you in there." I held my breath. Then the guy knocked again and said the same thing again like he was waiting for a response. He was trying to do some creepy, playful voice like he thought something was funny. I was not dealing with any of this. I grabbed the remote and turned the TV volume up, trying to drown him out. For maybe 30 seconds, there was no sound at all. Then I heard the vibration of a door opening outside. Hearing that instantly made my heart start racing because I knew he had left his room. I muted the TV and listened carefully. I could feel the vibration of footsteps on the balcony outside, getting closer to my room. My blinds were fully shut except for a tiny crack near the edge where they did not fully meet the wall. I kept staring at that crack, wondering if I should look or not. Part of me thought I was just making the situation scarier in my head than it really was. Eventually, curiosity won. I walked slowly to the window and pulled the blinds apart just enough to see outside. The second I looked through, I saw a man standing right outside my window, trying to look in. His face was so close to the glass that it made me jump backward immediately. We definitely made eye contact for a split second. His eyes looked wide open. The second I moved away from the window, he started making these weird voices outside. I promise when I say he sounded like he was copying characters. I did not know what characters, but he was having a whole creepy voice acting practice outside my motel room door. Then he started knocking on my door while changing his voice over and over. 1 second, he sounded high-pitched and childish, then suddenly deep and angry. I remember one of the voices sounding like an exaggerated southern accent. It would have sounded ridiculous, maybe even funny, in any normal situation, but hearing it outside my motel room at nearly 2 o'clock in the morning terrified me. This was obviously a sick, mentally ill person. The knocking kept getting harder, not enough to break the door down, but enough that I thought the whole motel could hear it. I called the front office immediately and told the guy that somebody outside my room was acting insane and would not leave me alone. The guy sounded irritated at first until he probably heard the banging through phone. Then his tone changed and he said he would come up right away. The guy outside kept switching voices and knocking for another minute or two. Then suddenly it stopped completely. I looked through the peephole and saw him speed walking back into the room, beside mine. A few seconds later, the motel worker came upstairs carrying a flashlight with his other hand resting on a holster. He knocked on the door next to mine after seeing the guy rush into that room, and he started trying to talk to the guy inside. I could not hear everything clearly, but he kept asking him to open the door. There was no answer at all from inside. The worker stood there for maybe a minute before finally coming over to me. I opened the door and explained everything that happened. The worker hesitated for a second before saying the guy had been staying there for a while. That answer alone made me want to leave immediately. I asked if I could switch rooms, and he said yes. He moved me to a room downstairs near the front office right by my car. I grabbed my few belongings as fast as possible and followed him down there. The new room was basically identical to the first one, except it was not next to a mentally ill person. I remember feeling relieved once I locked myself inside, because I figured there was no way the guy would bother me again after management got involved. I turned the TV on quietly and sat awake for a while, replaying the whole thing in my head. Eventually, exhaustion caught up to me, and I started drifting off. I do not know how much time passed before I woke up again, but it was still dark outside. What woke me up was the sound of someone outside the room. I looked toward the window and saw a shadow move past a crack in the blinds. Then a few seconds later, it passed again. Not this again. I carefully moved close to the window, without making noise, and looked through the crack. It was the same guy from upstairs. He was creepily walking past my room over and over again. The weird part was he was not making voices anymore. He was not knocking either. He just kept walking by while looking toward the room every time he passed. I remember feeling even more uncomfortable because now he seemed calm. I watched him do this maybe 4 or 5 times before he finally disappeared toward the back of the motel. I did not sleep again after that. The second the sun started coming up, I packed all my stuff, threw it into the car, and left without even returning the key card. I stopped at a gas station down the road for coffee and realized my hands were still shaking. People are weird and downright dangerous. Staying at a creepy motel is probably the fastest way to meet those kinds of people. I will never stay at one again. So, just to explain first, this happened in 2022 when I was a freshman in college. I am from Central Texas and went to Texas State University. My family had to come pick me up from my dorm during spring break so we could go on a road trip to Oklahoma. Why Oklahoma? Well, there is a lot of Native American history there, and my stepmom has some Native American ancestry. Anyway, we spent some time in Oklahoma before deciding we were kind of bored there, so we drove to Branson. This road trip was only us girls, so my dad did not come with us. It was me, my 3 sisters, my stepmom, and my grandma. Once we finished in Branson, and the week-long break was coming to an end, we started our drive back to my college. The drive obviously could not be done in one night alone. So, around 8 p.m., we decided to stop at a random motel on the side of the highway to get some sleep. We checked in and paid, but before settling in, we decided to get some pizza. Before leaving, we dropped our stuff off in our rooms. My grandma called us asking what the room number was so she could change clothes quickly. We were standing in the lobby when she called, and my sister told her the room number out loud. That was when I noticed this man just standing at the entrance of the building. I am very aware of things because I get scared easily, so I always look around and make sure nothing feels strange. This man was wearing a black knitted sweater and black pants. I asked my sister why she thought he was standing there like that without doing anything. She brushed it off, but I did not. At that point, I started getting even more nervous because I realized she had just said our room number out loud while this man could clearly hear her since the motel was not very big at all. We had to walk past him to leave. And when we did, I made eye contact with him that still gives me chills to this day. But that was it for the moment. We came back around 10 o'clock or 11 p.m. By then, we were exhausted from driving all day and just wanted to sleep. Me and my two sisters walked into the motel while my other sister, stepmom, and grandma stayed outside getting things from the car. When we walked in, I saw that guy again. This time, he was sitting in the far back corner of the lobby where there were TVs. That whole section was dark with no lights on. He was just sitting there doing nothing. That scared me even more. To make things worse, my grandma called again asking for the room number. And once again, my sister said it out loud right in front of the man. I started walking a little faster and noticed the man was now on his phone talking to someone. I could not hear what he was saying because he was whispering. We went up to the second floor where our rooms were. Two of my sisters were in one room, and my other sister, stepmom, and grandma were in another room. The rooms were not directly next to each other. There was one room between them. We went into our room, and everything seemed fine for a little while. We were just lying on our phones getting ready for bed. Maybe 20 minutes later, we heard a knock on the door. I had already been telling my sisters how scared I was. So, this immediately freaked me out because I thought it was that creepy man from downstairs. Thankfully, it was my stepmom. The second we opened the door, she rushed inside. That instantly set off alarm bells in my head. I asked her what happened. She told us to start packing immediately, and I could tell she was completely serious. So we started packing. While we were packing, she explained that she had opened her door to put some trash outside and suddenly came face to face with a man standing silently against the wall right beside the door. When she opened it, he did not even look surprised. He just stared at her for a second. Then she said the worst part. After staring at her, he calmly walked into the room between our two rooms. That completely pushed me over the edge. We all started leaving the motel, while my stepmom went to front desk to ask for a refund. Surprisingly, they actually gave her one after she explained the situation. After that, we walked outside only to see the same guy stepping out of the elevator and heading back into the lobby. Once outside, we noticed another man who looked like he was trying to break into cars. And when I say that, I mean it. He had his hands pressed against windows, looking inside, pulling on door handles and shaking them, trying to open the doors. I was so shocked by everything happening that I caught myself just standing there frozen. I guess we were being kind of loud because he suddenly looked over at us while we were getting into the car. He then looked toward the motel entrance and motioned his head like he was signaling someone to come outside. Thank God by then we had all gotten into the car already because I watched all this happen from the window. The first creepy guy I had noticed earlier walked outside and started talking to the other man while they kept looking over at our car. We still had not driven away yet because my stepmom had called my dad to explain what was happening. And honestly, we did not even know where to go at that point or who would take us in that late at night. Then a third man appeared. At that point, there were now 3 men slowly walking toward our car. I begged my stepmom to start driving. I guess she was panicking and did not know what to do because everyone in the car was yelling at her to go. We finally sped off and kept driving until around 3 a.m. before finding another motel to stay at. That motel had roaches, but honestly, I would take roaches over what we had just escaped from. I still do not know what those men were planning to do, or if they even had a plan at all. But based on the way that first man acted all night, I am incredibly glad we left before finding out. So, if you have never stayed in a motel, they are basically a hotel's smaller, poorer little cousin. Compared to a hotel, they are usually completely bare bones. You just get a bed to sleep on, a bathroom, and that is it. But that is the good thing about them. Sometimes if you do not want to spend hotel-level money, I feel like the 2 times you book a motel are when you are on a road trip or if you are on a long vacation and want to lower hotel costs by staying in a motel for part of the trip. So my girlfriend Julie and I were the first example. We were driving down to Florida, which is a 17-hour drive for us. I insisted on driving all the way through or just sleeping in the car, but she understandably did not want to do that. When we were about 11 hours into the drive, it was dark, late, and I was struggling to keep my eyes open. We had already pinned a motel on the map half an hour earlier that Julie found. It was about half a mile off the highway. Julie was already asleep. I planned to wake her up when we got to the motel. Julie had already booked us a reservation for the motel. Seeing 2 minutes left on the screen was a huge relief. I pulled off the highway and eventually into the motel parking lot. It was kind of dead there. I think there was one other car, and honestly, it could have belonged to a front office employee. I woke Julie up and told her I was going to check us in. I went to the little front office, and there was a woman sitting there. She looked tired and messy, but she still gave me a smile and greeted me. I think she had been sleeping but got up and went to the office to greet us for the reservation. She gave me the key and told me the room number, room 5. It was the far corner on the ground floor. Julie and I brought our small bags into the room. It was a basic motel room. We took turns in the bathroom brushing our teeth and getting ready for bed. When I looked through my bag and realized my phone charger was still in the car, I got up and told Julie I would be right back. She just made a little grunt like she was too tired, and using words would take too much energy. I opened the door and left it slightly cracked open. I walked over the car and pressed the button on the key fob to unlock it. The lights flashed on, and I think that was when I noticed the lights in the front office were off. The lady had gone back to sleep. I guess maybe that car was hers, and she lived on the property. That would not surprise me. But now the place was completely dark. It was a little creepy. There was not even any traffic on the road. As I got to my car, I searched around looking for my charger. I have the new iPhone with the USB-C port. Julie has the older one, and she always likes to unplug my phone so she can connect to CarPlay. So I spent a minute looking for it until I found it in the center compartment. I guess she had put it there. I closed the car door, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw someone standing right by the door to our room. It was a man. I had left the door cracked open out of habit, so I would not get locked out, even though the doors did not lock automatically. I jogged over to make it clear I was there before this man entered the room or did something weird. I have to admit this man was large. Not just tall, but broad too. He was wearing a long trench coat that did not fit the slightly chilly weather. As I got close to the door, it really looked like he was planning to open it. When he heard me coming, he turned around. The man immediately smiled and had a very soft attitude. The way he spoke was so soft that instead of sounding calming, it felt unsettling. He asked me how I was doing tonight. Keep in mind, it was past 1 a.m. I could sense something strange in his intentions with his small talk. So I avoided it and skipped to the important question, if there even was one, which was, "What are you doing walking around so late? Are you staying here?" He quickly answered in the same soft voice, saying, "Oh, I'm staying upstairs, just going for a walk." I nodded and smiled back and said, "Well, enjoy your walk. Have a good night." He smiled and nodded, and then I went inside and shut the door. I locked it pretty quickly. Julie was already in bed snoring. She sleeps like a baby. Otherwise, I would have talked to her about how weird that encounter had just been. I stood by the door with my ear against it. I was not sure if I would be able to hear footsteps walking away or not. All I know is I did not hear any. Was he still standing there? I was scared to find out, but I had to know. I got on my knees and crawled over the window and very carefully moved the curtain a little to the side, just enough to see in front of the room door. He was there. He was actually standing in front of our motel room door, like he was staring at it. I lay on the floor like that for 10 minutes. He would not move. It felt like I was having a staring contest with him, while he was having a staring contest with our door. I finally gave up and crawled over to the bed. When I got into bed, I shook Julie awake, but told her to stay quiet. She was sleepy until I explained everything about that encounter, and that he was still outside the door. I did not want to scare her, but I also did not want to deal with the situation alone, and I knew she would not believe me if I did not tell her. I whispered for her to crawl to the window and look outside. She said I was scaring her and told me to stop, but I begged her to look so she would believe me. She finally agreed and got on her knees and crawled to the window where I had moved the curtain. She looked toward the door and said, "He's not there." I said, "Look harder. Are you sure?" Then she gasped, almost screamed. She got up and ran back to the bed. I immediately panicked and asked, "What is it? What did you see?" She told me to look out the window toward the rooms across the parking lot. I crawled back to the window and looked around, and I saw it almost immediately. The guy in the trench coat was across the parking lot. He was standing still, but still facing our room. Actually, he was facing the window. I knew it felt like he saw me watching him. I looked for 30 seconds, and he did not move. I quickly pulled the curtain shut. I told Julie I was freaking the hell out. I grabbed a blunt object just to keep beside the bed secretly. I did not want Julie to see that and realize I expected things to get physical. We waited in bed for about an hour. At some point during that time, we thought we heard footsteps walk past outside, but we could not be sure. All I know is we both agreed we heard something outside near the window. The terrifying thought that he might have been outside our window the whole time was honestly sickening. Part of me just felt like he was right outside. It was so late at that point, and we were so exhausted from the drive that I think we just fell asleep without realizing it. We woke up the next morning, actually relieved that we had made it through the night. We put our stuff in the car, and I went to the front desk. The same lady was there. I think she owned the place. I returned the key and told her about the man in the trench coat and how he had been creepily walking around and then standing outside our door for 10 minutes. The woman looked scared and surprised when I told her this. She said she knew of no such man. She also said we were the only guests there that night. When I asked, she said she did not even have cameras. Julie and I thanked the woman, and we got the hell out of there. I almost felt bad for leaving that woman there alone. But honestly, Julie and I did not want to stay there for another second. It was just an extremely strange night. A once-in-a-lifetime creepy experience that we will probably tell people about forever.